Hello everyone. I believe it was last video mentioned in passing that I had ordered a new board game that was being released called 1754 Conquest. Board game about the French and Indian War. It's made by Academy Games, designed by Bo Beckett and Jeff Stahl. And if anybody has any experience with the 1812 board game or the 1775 board game, this is a very similar game. It uses the same mechanics. Except that now it's a game about the French and Indian War. I figured I've already unboxed opened it up, so it's not necessarily an unboxing per se. But I figured we could take a look at it, do a quick review of everything, the pieces, components, stuff like that, and then future videos I plan on doing a playthrough. Here's a quick look at the back of the box before we open it up. Again, 1754 Conquest gives a couple examples of the cards, game pieces, dice, etc. And then just a quick read of the back of the box. It says, the year is 1754 and France and Britain have thriving colonies in North America. New England colonies have begun to expand west into the Ohio River Valley. In response, France has built a chain of force to protect their American territorial claims extending from Lake Erie to the Gulf of Mexico. Virginia's governor sends a young George Washington with a small force to convince the French to leave the region. A deadly confrontation with the French and their Native American allies deep in the Appalachian wilderness sparks the beginning of a world war that engulfs Americas, Europe, and India. In 1754 Conquest, each player controls a French or British faction and competes for dominance over the Americas. The French players command the French Canadians and the French regulars. The British players command the British colonials and the British regulars. Both sides attempt to ally themselves with powerful Native American nations. Players for each side plan and work together in order to control important town and fort victory areas on the map. So here I have all the components of the board laid out. And it's important to note that these over here do not come with a base game. These are extras that you can purchase from Academy Games. You have a treaty board, which it's a card-driven game, and one of the cards has to do with the treaty. And so you have this board you could place the treaty cards on. You have card holders for each of the factions. There's an alternate setup that once you become experienced with the game, you could do a couple of different things in the setup phase of the game to kind of change things up and adjust the difficulty. And then there's also additional cards. It's a Native Alliance expansion that each faction draws a card, and then that allows them to do something extra. I haven't actually looked at the cards, so I'm not entirely sure all the different things that you could do, but a lot of the Native Alliance cards allow you to do stuff beyond what the traditional normal game allows. You can see the board here. It's actually fairly large. It's quite colorful and quite beautiful, actually. The artwork is amazing. And they have Native American artwork and motifs. The turn track and the round track down here using kind of Native American influenced markings. You have three different colors on the board. You have this kind of pink or light red color. This would be your British faction. The green color would be your Native American factions, and then the purple up top or lavender are the French factions. Then you have tokens. You have fort tokens. These are control marker tokens, which are double-sided. And so one side would be the French, and the other side would be the English. Fort tokens for forts on the battlefield, which is a new addition for those of you that played 1775 or 1812. This is a new addition to the 1754 game. Forts played a rather important, decisive part in the French and Indian War. Perhaps not the fact that they were actively involved, but the forts definitely influenced the direction that the various campaigns took, and that the forts were deemed important and that they had to be taken, captured, or held onto And not necessarily that there were any active actual battles, long-term sieges. There were a handful, but most of the forts were either abandoned or captured without any serious siege activity. And then these 4 markers up top here have to do with your the colonial factions. You have the French Canadians and the British colonials. This is marks where they're allowed to get reinforcements. You have a turn marker. That's that little meeple-looking guy. Then you have the fort die. If there's a battle that occurs in the fort die, the defender gets is allowed to roll the fort die, and it has effect on the battle. These cubes or dice, there's 5 blank dice which are used to determine by random draw out of this bag the turn order, and then they're placed on this track down here. And then the little meeple on top would be, as each game turn, as every faction plays, and you keep track of which turn it is on that. But the cubes are placed on each of these symbols here to help determine the order, and it's blind, so you don't know what order which player is going to go when. So you draw a color out of the bag, place it down, and then the reason why there are these symbols here, if you note, for example, this symbol, this kind of flower symbol, there's corresponding symbols on the map, and that denotes whenever the green cube is drawn from the bag and placed on whatever symbol, that is those territories with those symbols receive native allied reinforcements. And that's a change from the earlier games. 1775, the native allies were more static. As far as if they didn't really get reinforcements unless a card was drawn. In this game, the natives have a more active role. They're not a player per se, but I believe that you will see them involved in the game more than in the earlier iterations. But anyways, the other dice have symbols on it, and those are your battle dice, each color corresponding to a specific faction. And then it's a card-driven game. So each faction there'll be 4 decks of cards set out for each specific faction, and then there's event cards and movement cards. You have to play a movement card every turn, and then there's also additional event cards that allow you to gain additional reinforcements or perhaps build an extra fort or various things that might have an influence on the game. And then the actual markers for units on the battle are these little wooden cubes. So it's simplistic in the sense that units aren't specifically detailed. Movement is by area. But I do believe that, especially if those of you played 1775 or 1812, you understand that even though the pieces are simple and gameplay is relatively simple, there's a lot of depth and nuance to the game just by the way you can move around and how you can accomplish different goals that you want to accomplish. Another thing that the game includes, and I had to do some searching on the internet, but there's these plastic covers. And I was like, well, what are these plastic covers for? I found out that inside the case are these trays, and they're perforated, so that way you could put, each faction can have its own little tray with its dice and markers, colored markers, and stuff like that. And then these little clear plastic, they're the lids for the trays, so that way they remain secure and they don't spill around and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool, little cool addition. Then the rulebook, it's full color, and it's actually pretty simple as far as the actual rules are concerned. This page is the setup page, which is page 2 and 3. The rule starts on page 4, and really it goes to page 6 for the actual rules. Page 7 are battle examples. Different things you could do during the battle. Page 8 has the victory, how you do the victory or determine victory, and then an explanation of the event cards. And then the event cards themselves, clarifies, what it is that is actually meant to do. So the actual rules of the game cover 4 pages. And really the meat of the rules of the game only cover 3 pages. So, really, again, it's a simple game. The rules are simple, but there's a lot of nuance. And then the really cool thing is the last half of the book gives a historical overview. It kind of just gives a brief discussion of the French and Indian War, the events that occurred, big battles, and then the end of the war. And that's pretty much the end of the actual rulebook. The rulebook itself is nice, colorful, thick, glossy paper, very sturdy. And overall, if you've played 1775 or 1812, as I understand, and I've only played a handful of games of 1775, so it's not like I have a lot of experience, but 90% of the rules are the same. If you know how to play those games, then you know how to play this game. But there are a handful of minor differences or additions. One being the green die for the Native Americans. In this game, like I said before, the Native Americans have a different method of coming onto the board. The forts is a big addition. So you can see fort symbols, and then with those fort tokens, you place them down there. And again, the town tokens for the colonials. This is where they would get the colonial reinforcements. And then the other big addition is naval movement. They have these shaded areas, they're port areas, and this is where the French and British regulars are reinforced. Whereas in 1775, that's the one that I've actually played. I've only played actually that one, so that's the one I'm familiar with. 1775, in order to get reinforcements, regardless of what type, you had to own all of the portions of a colony, and then have a marker token down to show that you own that colony, and then that you're able to reinforce in that colony. Whereas this, it's prior to that point. There is no American colonies. There is no American government. This is prior to that. So the colonial areas are much more abstract as far as movement, taking into account the wilderness and stuff like that, and how difficult things were to move. So the reinforcement in the older game is you had to have an entire colony under your control to reinforce there. This one, if you're a colonist, you could only reinforce in the specific town areas in which you have a town token, and the regulars can only reinforce into a sea zone that is either empty or a sea zone that you have your own troops in. And then you can also do sea zone to sea zone movement with different cards, following specific rules. So it really allows you to, the naval movement portion of the game is a lot more fluid. So you could, have troops here, and you could have a naval invasion up here into Quebec or Louisbourg, which historically, was a big thing that the British needed to do in order to maintain control of the North American colonies, as they had to capture Louisbourg. And in order to, to reflect that, is how many victory points Louisbourg is worth, which we could talk about that real quick. The game is scored by these little tokens here, like these little stars, and the territory of Louisbourg has 2 of them. And then you have some green areas that have stars as well. So the important thing to realize is the English, for example, they don't place any tokens down and on the stars in the territories of their color, because they automatically control those. The only time they place markers down is if they capture a territory that's green or capture a territory that's purple, and vice versa for the French. So at the end of the game ends when all the truce cards of a side, so the British regulars and colonials, or the French regulars and the Canadians, place down their truce cards, and at the end of the turn, that is when the game ends. After the start of the third turn, you can't do that in the first 2. You can place the truce cards down in round 1 or 2, but the game doesn't end. It doesn't end until turn 3 or later. But anyways, once you're at the end of the turn and or at the game and the truce cards have been placed, the number of tokens that you have out on the board, so the number of captured green or purple if you're English or red if you're French, the number of those captured territories with victory points, so those tokens that are laid down, determines the more, or the one that has the larger number of victory tokens down wins the game. So that's generally speaking, but the importance of Louisburg historically is reflected in the fact that Louisburg is 2 victory points. So if the English capture Louisburg, they get 2 victory points. So it's important for the French, even though it's way out of the way and almost kind of seems inconsequential. Historically, it's a very important fortress and position, so the French need to worry about defending it. Now, historically, Louisburg was the stepping stone for Quebec. So in this game, you don't necessarily have to have Louisburg captured in order to assault Quebec, but so you could have your English fleet here and then move them up into Quebec. But it's important to realize that as a player, the Navy plays a bigger importance in this game than in earlier games, because if you just leave a port zone open, so if the French don't have any troops in this Quebec port zone, the English regulars during the English regular reinforcement phase can just plop troops down right there. So there's a portion of, you do have to be aware of defending your territories as much as you do have to be aware of attacking your opponent's territory as well. And then I guess just to take a quick close look at the boards, you can kind of just see the artwork and the details. I mean, this is beautiful artwork. Little hills. If any of you have the artwork style, especially the hills, is very reminiscent of, to me, it reminds me of the mapping program of the computer Campaign Cartographer. So there's just elements of the style that just reminds me of that. So that's generally, I guess, the overview of the game. I plan on playing, if I can get together with friends or my family. I think this would be a game my family would enjoy if I can convince them to actually play it with me. You know how that goes. But otherwise, I do plan on playing some solo games, and if you guys are interested, let me know, and I'd be happy to record those solo games, and that way you guys can keep track of the progress, or maybe even give me tips or suggestions, or strategic games. And even then, the game would be simple enough and quick enough and easy enough that we could even get 4 people online, and I could be the moderator of the game, and then the other 4 people, they can have their factions, and we could play a board game online even if you guys so desire. So let me know what you guys want me to do about that. I'd be happy to if there's any interest. Otherwise, I'll just play the game by myself. That's no problem. Another channel or gaming news, my Sport of Kings campaign is ongoing. We did have a campaign turn a couple weeks ago. I was out of town, so I haven't had an opportunity to actually make the video of that. I will get that up shortly. Hopefully this weekend I can work on it. Coincidentally enough, one of the battles we are going to have is in the New World. So we will have another French and Indian War battle in our miniature game as well. And then also on the painting front, I'm taking a break from my 6mm stuff. I'm just not feeling the motivation to paint my 6mm stuff, so I started painting some 15mm stuff. I want to kind of work on that. I'd like to kind of improve my style of painting, and I think working on the 15mm stuff will let me improve my painting techniques and stuff like that. So as I get more progress on that, I'll be sure to put an update video on that as well. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys want, and I'd be happy to videotape whatever it is you guys want me to videotape, gaming related, to say the least. So let me know, and hope everyone is having a great day and happy gaming. One last thing I forgot to mention. There is an additional game component that you don't have to buy. The Academy Games company on their website has a PDF file that you can download. In the earlier games, at least I should say for 1775, that I know for sure, they had a paperwork. I should also say these are also included. It's an advertisement for their next game, 1878 Vikings, which they're doing a Kickstarter for right now, which actually looks pretty exciting. But anyways, about this size and about this thickness, this heavy paper or light cardstock, basically was a small map of the game board map, and plus it gave a diagram of the dice for each faction and what their probability was of getting different things, and then the discussion of the turn sequence and stuff. This game did not come with that, but the company Academy Games on their website has provided it as a free PDF download that you can save, use on an iPad, or maybe even take it to like Kinko's or something and print off. So just didn't want to forget about that. So that's it. Talk to you later. Bye.